The hidden masculine wound. That's destroying your relationships. Every man carries a wound so fundamental to his being that he doesn't even know it exists. It quietly erodes his relationships, drains his energy, and blinds him from seeing the very love he desperately seeks. Robert Johnson called it the wound of the heart. And once you understand it, you'll never see relationships the same way again. Imagine a young boy, wide-eyed and open-hearted, who learns very early that his emotions are dangerous. Big boys don't cry. Man up. Don't be so sensitive. These aren't just casual phrases. They're the first cuts that create the masculine wound. The wound I'm talking about isn't just about suppressing tears, it goes much deeper. Robert Johnson, a Jungian analyst who studied directly under Carl Jung himself, discovered something profound about the masculine psyche. He found that men aren't just taught to hide their emotions. They're conditioned to sever the connection between their head and their heart. This isn't a metaphor. This is a psychological amputation that happens so early, most men don't remember life before the wound. Think about it. When was the last time a man in your life could clearly articulate what he was feeling, without translating it first into thoughts, solutions, or actions? This isn't a character flaw. It's evidence of the wound. But here's where it gets interesting, and where everything you thought you knew about relationship problems gets turned upside down. This wound doesn't just hurt men, it sabotages every relationship they touch. Picture this. A woman expresses emotional distress to her partner. What happens next is almost predictable. He immediately shifts into problem-solving mode. Here's what you should do. Let me fix this for you. Have you tried looking at it this way? Meanwhile, she grows increasingly frustrated because what she wanted wasn't solutions, it was connection. He's not being dismissive. He's responding from his wound. When a man has been severed from his emotional wisdom, he does the only thing he knows how to do. He thinks his way through a feeling problem. But emotions don't speak the language of logic. They speak the language of the heart. This wound creates a man who is extraordinarily capable in the external world, but a stranger to his internal landscape. He can build companies, solve complex problems, and navigate cutthroat competition, but ask him to navigate the terrain of his own emotions and he's suddenly lost without a compass. Johnson describes this as the wounded Fisher King archetype from ancient mythology, a king whose wound prevents him from fully living, whose kingdom becomes barren because of his unhealed pain. But there's something even more devastating about this wound that no one talks about. When a man is disconnected from his own emotional reality, he becomes terrified of a woman's emotional depth. Her feelings become threatening because they remind him of what he's lost touch with inside himself. And what do we do when we're threatened? We either attack or retreat. This explains why emotionally intense moments in relationships often trigger one of two responses in men. They either become defensive and argumentative, or they shut down and withdraw. Both reactions stem from the same root, a wounded heart trying to protect itself from further pain. But here's the tragic irony. The very defenses that men build to protect themselves from emotional pain are the exact barriers that prevent deep, fulfilling connections with their partners. The masculine wound doesn't just destroy relationships, it prevents them from ever truly beginning. Think about how many relationships exist on a surface level, discussing schedules, solving practical problems, sharing physical space, but never truly opening to the raw, vulnerable communion that the soul craves. That's not a relationship. That's a business arrangement with occasional physical intimacy. Johnson would say that this wound creates what he calls shadow lovers, men who seek the divine feminine not through authentic connection but through projection, fantasy, and idealization. They're not loving the actual woman in front of them. They're loving the feeling she temporarily awakens in them, a feeling that belongs to their own buried heart. This explains the common pattern of men who are initially infatuated with a woman, only to grow distant once the relationship deepens. The initial chemistry wasn't with her, it was with the disowned parts of himself that she momentarily helped him access. Modern psychology has confirmed what Johnson intuited decades ago. Studies now show that emotional disconnection is a leading predictor of relationship failure, more significant than even communication problems or compatibility issues. But there's hope in understanding this wound, because once a man recognizes the injury, he can begin the journey toward healing. Now, I mentioned earlier that healing doesn't require years of therapy. It requires something simpler, but harder. What is that something? It's the courage to feel, not to think about feelings, not to analyze feelings, not to justify feelings, but to actually feel them in the body as they arise, without running away. This sounds so basic that you might wonder how it could possibly be transformative. But for a man who has spent decades avoiding his emotional reality, simply staying present with his feelings is as foreign and frightening as walking on another planet. The masculine wound creates men who are essentially emotional tourists. They visit their feelings briefly but never establish residency there. Healing requires becoming a permanent citizen of your own emotional landscape. Johnson would prescribe specific practices for this healing journey. First, learning to identify emotions in the body. Where do you feel anger physically? Where does grief live in your system? This reconnects the mind with the body's emotional wisdom. Second, developing the capacity to sit with discomfort without immediately trying to solve it, numb it, or escape it. This builds the emotional equivalent of a muscle. Third, expressing vulnerability not as a performance or strategy, but as a genuine sharing of one's truth. This doesn't mean performative emoting, but rather authentic disclosure of one's inner experience. The irony is that the very qualities men have been taught to reject, sensitivity, emotional awareness, and vulnerability, are precisely the qualities that create the deepest connections with others. The path to stronger relationships isn't becoming more stoic or more logical. It's reclaiming the wholeness of the masculine heart. I've witnessed this transformation in countless men who've done this work. They discover that feeling emotions doesn't make them weak. It makes them more fully human. They learn that vulnerability isn't a liability. It's the gateway to the connection they've always wanted but couldn't access. One client described it like this: I spent 40 years being what I thought a man should be. Now I'm learning how to be who I actually am. And strangely, I feel more masculine than ever. That's the paradox of healing the masculine wound. In reclaiming the heart, a man doesn't become less of a man. He becomes more fully himself. This work isn't just about saving relationships, although it will transform them. It's about saving men from the quiet desperation of living from only half of their humanity. As Robert Johnson wrote, the foundation of masculine healing is accepting both light and dark within oneself, embracing qualities culturally labeled as strength, alongside those labeled as weakness, knowing they are all essential parts of being whole. I believe we're witnessing a crucial moment in the evolution of masculinity. More men are recognizing their wound and committing to healing work. They're rejecting the limited models of manhood they inherited and forging a more integrated way of being. This isn't just good news for men. It's transformative for relationships, families, and society as a whole. Because when men heal their relationship with their own hearts, they heal their relationships with everything else. If something about this message resonated with you, whether you recognize this wound in yourself or in someone you love, I invite you to share your experience in the comments below. Your story might become the lantern in someone else's darkness, the very sign they didn't know they were searching for. And if you know someone who's struggling in their relationships, someone who can't understand why connection seems so elusive despite their best efforts, share this video with them. Help me reach those who need to hear that their wound isn't their fault, but healing it is their responsibility. Before you go, subscribe and activate the notification bell. Here in this space, we dive beneath the surface, exploring the hidden architecture of the psyche and how it shapes our capacity for love, work, and authentic living. If there's a specific relationship challenge or psychological insight you'd like to explore in future videos, let me know in the comments. This channel breathes because of your engagement and curiosity. Thank you for showing up, not just to this video, but to the sacred work of becoming more fully human. Remember, the journey of healing isn't about becoming someone different. It's about becoming who you already are beneath the wound. Until next time, I'll see you on the path.